And they also need to look at some recruiting tools if they can as well, things like disc profiling. And there's numbers of different recruiting tools that employers can use, but seldom do they, because in a lot of these cases they don't understand that these tools exist. There's four main elements with disc profiling, which is the D, the I, the S and the C. And on this panel here, there is this is a microcosm of what's happening out there for all businesses. Most agencies need a mixture of different profiles, and you need to have someone who's a D, which is a driver and a driven person, and that's normally the leader. And as Richie was saying before, if you have a wife or a spouse that is not supporting you, they could be foot tripping you along the way. Now, they're not part of the process of recruiting, but perhaps they should be. Now, the I is someone who's a strong influencer. And Grant is a very high D and a high I because he's a fantastic salesperson, but he's also totally independent as well and a driver in his company. Then you've got the S, which stands for systemization, which most accountants are system driven. And the C is for compliant. And sometimes you've got the yin and yang of the opposites actually attract, which is the compliant side is someone who might be a counsellor or someone who doesn't rock the boat that much. Now, together you need to have all of those. And just imagine a property management department where you've got somebody that's been qualified in a counselling role in property management when they have to terminate a tenant. It's just going to be almost impossible, and you've got the wrong type of people.
Yeah, well, the disc profile is extremely important, and I think the way Jeff actually explained it then demonstrates how you actually balance up your team, that you've got certain roles that certainly factor strongly in one or two of those particular elements. On the disc profiling, if we're focusing on the sales orientation, I find that the combination ID is a very strong one, and the balance, I feel sometimes more so to the I because of the expressiveness and the ability to connect. The D is the closure, and what you do find and what principals need to be aware, if you don't actually look behind those factors, they may have all those good things, but if you can't actually close the deal and look at the opportunity, you're not actually a salesperson. You need to identify that once I've opened up the needs and I find that we've got the right circumstance, I've got to facilitate the agreement and I've got to negotiate and get everything into place. So those IDs become extremely important. My experience across the industry has found that when we actually get the S and Cs in the sales role, it actually becomes a little bit of a detractor unless that person's got some exceptional skills. The beauty is, however, the permutations, because you've got four areas, the permutations are so wide that there's no... I've given what I believe with my experience has been a range, but it doesn't mean that there's not one person out there that may have something different that can still do the job.
One of the personality surveys that I've worked a lot with is the McQuaig personality survey, and one of the interesting things with it is it shows that you're real and you're situational, so how you really are and how you act, which can be quite different. I think the main thing with those, and I like to share them with the people that have actually done them, some managers decide, no, well, it's in our wisdom, we'll keep it and we won't tell them about it, and I've seen that happen quite often. And the reality is the people who read their own reports, you need to look at it not as a crutch, not as this is why I am like this. And all too often I've heard people that have read them say, if only my office owner would read this, they would understand why I do this. But you look at it and you go, okay, I want to work on that strength. I need to strengthen that aspect of my personality.
I think it leads right into what I was going to say, which is in this, there's a matrix, and it's as wide as is deep, and there's all these permutations inside that. And I know as a salesperson myself that, you know, I was able to move within that matrix depending on who I was speaking to on the day. So I would tune into that person. If they're a high D, I'm a high D, or if they're a C, I'm a C. And I think the ability for a salesperson to be able to move within that matrix is essential. But also, you need to recognise that, you know, some salespeople may not fit with that vendor, that seller. And so I know in my offices at times we've said, look, this isn't working and we're going to lose this listing. Let's swap those agents around, and usually you'll find you get a deal within 10 days. So often the problem, you know, the salesperson's in their own way. They're in between themselves and their own money because they're actually fighting that relationship with the vendor. And I think that's how I see that.